This is kind of a loaded question, but do you think that, considering the nature of the work that Judicial Watch does in trying to bring things to light, but do you think that the president made a tactical or strategic mistake in declassifying the whistleblower report and the transcript from the call because of the separation of powers issues and the ceding of authority and too much? Now, because as soon as that came out, Democrats started saying, well, we want to see more transcripts, so we want to see more call. Should he have held the line at that point?
I don't think so, because he certainly is educating the public. As I said, this is the impeachment about nothing. Mm-hmm. So I think that transcript has helped develop that. And I've often observed that it's the Alice in Wonderland impeachment. A verdict first, evidence never. Right. So I don't really think anything he could have said or done in terms of making documents available or anything else would stop the impeachment train. So, in many ways, I'm complaining about the collapse of the constitutional defenses. But on the other hand, the fight would have been used against them by the Schiff crowd, because they're currently saying that any lawful objections to our subpoenas is an admission of guilt. Talk about star chamber proceedings.
I mean,
to call it a witch hunt is a slur on the witch hunters.
But they also have
at least they had they had a legal process when they were going after the Salem witches.
Well,
here, there's no
whether or not she can float isn't much of one.
Yeah, but there's not even the patina of a legal process here. This is all just power politics.
Well, you have this situation where the Democrats want to subpoena the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Any communication between those two would be privileged.
This president has been so abused that no other defendant or citizen would have had to suffer through, in terms of having his attorney-client privileges violated, his being spied upon, people around him, his family being spied upon, just being targeted by these bureaucracies and law enforcement in a way that no one else would have been targeted in such a way. And if they had been, the government would have been brought to heel by the courts or the political process. Here, all bets are off. Because it's Trump, the protections of the law don't apply and the Constitution doesn't apply. Look, the president's not above the law, but he's not beneath the protection of the law. And by saying that there's got to be restrictions on the government or the Congress's ability to upend the republic doesn't mean you're above the law. It means that the Constitution's got to work here. And there are separations of powers, and there are rights the president has as president and as a citizen. And just because you want to go on an impeachment jihad, it doesn't mean you get to burn down the rest of the Constitution to do so.
Republicans, though, you said the phrase that I think describes a lot of Washington since the election of 2016, because it's Trump. Because it's Trump. A lot of Republicans are keeping their powder dry, they're keeping away from it. They're giving it a wide berth. They don't want to be directly involved. U.S. senators are kind of, Mitt Romney will go to a camera every once in a while and say something stupid. But aside from a Lindsey Graham, there doesn't seem to be a proactive group in the Senate willing to come out and preemptively call garbage when they see garbage on the other side of the Capitol building. Aside from a Devin Nunes or a Jim Jordan or a Mark Meadows, this is an opportunity that most politicians would never pass up. They could make a name for themselves here, right? A lot of us remember the House managers from the Clinton impeachment. Lindsey Graham is a United States Senator today because of his role in the Clinton impeachment, the prominent way that he presented himself back then. Yet there doesn't seem to be that. Most House Republicans want to avoid this. And is it part of this a failure? There's unity. Yes, when the vote comes, they put their card in, they push the button, they run away back to their offices and back to their districts. But is there a failure to really fight against this, fight back on this, rather than just playing defense on the Republican side?
Yeah, there is generally a lack of leadership. There aren't enough Republicans taking an aggressive tact here, but it's nothing new. There are many politicians here in Washington, and you think, oh, you're a senator or you're a House member. Think of the opportunities you have to protect the country and advance the public interest. And that horrifies many elected officials in Washington. They consider this to be they'd be just as happy being a town councilman or a mayor of a small town. They have a very limited view of their roles as elected public servants here in Washington, D.C., and it's horrifying for them to take a leadership position on these core corruption issues. Look, they didn't do anything on Benghazi. They didn't do anything on Hillary Clinton. They did virtually nothing on Russiagate. I mean, it's been somnolescence out of the Republican-controlled Congress largely, and to highlight people like Nunes and Jordan and Meadows, frankly, is those are the exceptions that prove the rule. Because the fact is, you can only name 5 or 6 people.
I know.
On either side of
the bottom of the barrel,
yeah,
but I can't go any deeper than that.
Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson sending the letters out. Beyond that, what else has the Senate been doing?
Sending a letter. Big deal.
What else has been?
It's auto-penned, written by staff. But this isn't. I can't impress upon everybody enough about this, though, Tom. This isn't about Trump. This is about the presidency. These are precedents that are being set. That if Democrats, they're not naive enough to think that this will be the standard they'll never be held to this standard, right? I mean, once you break that next barrier, once you basically on inauguration or before Inauguration Day start unleashing prosecutors to crawl through the colon of every aspect of somebody's life, using the power of Congress to start questioning every single decision and demanding every document, you can't get that genie back in the bottle. So to think Republican House, Democratic President Elizabeth Warren, God forbid, but President Elizabeth Warren would face this kind of scrutiny. Do you think, as somebody who talks to these people, testifies before Congress, goes in the media, do you think this occurs to them, or do they really live in a world where there's the rest of life, the rest of history, then there's the Trump administration, this weird anomaly that afterwards, on the other end of it, we can go back to the way things were?
Oh, I don't think the Republican leadership on the Hill is going to do anything differently than they've done in the past. So? No. And the Democrats recognize that. And why would they be afraid of this? None of them have been held accountable for the abuses of President Trump. You had this massive spying campaign on the presidential candidate. They were talking about overthrowing him as president. Where's there been accountability? Hillary Clinton's never been prosecuted. Justice Department has essentially ratified the Comey criminal cover-up. I don't mean, I didn't mean, well, you know what I mean by that. Right. The cover-up was criminal.
Right.
And nothing's, it's, what are the Democrats, forget about the Democrats. What does the deep state, what is the administrative state, what are those who abuse their powers granted to them by the American people? None of them have been prosecuted. Now, maybe something will happen, and I think a lot of the coup cabal activity is as a result for fear of prosecution, however slight. There's always a possibility you get a prosecution, but unless someone's prosecuted, the Republicans aren't going to change their stripes unless there's a radical change in leadership attitude. And when you hear these radio ads at the end of the radio for financial products, they quickly say at the end of the ad, past performance is no indication of future success or future right, where there's always a risk. Well, actually, in politics, it's the opposite. Past performance is an indication of what will happen in the future, and you can expect more of the same. And what's the X factor? People like President Trump, which is why he's so despised in this town. He fired Comey. He fired Sessions. Frankly, I think the Sessions firing was more significant than the Comey firing in the sense that if not for that, we'd still have the Mueller operation sniffing around trying to figure out what they could do to keep on harassing the president and drive him from office.